the history of Lake Havasu?
I've researched some of the history of Lake Havasu, Arizona. Yes, it was. It started as a place called Site 6 in 1943. The United States Army basically the Army Air Force, before there was the creation of the Air Force later after World War II. They used it as one of these stopover points from relaying soldiers and supplies across the deserts of the Southwest. And Site 6 was actually, they took over somebody privately owned land and built air bases on top of it. And they began a R&R stopover, so rest and recuperation, basically a place of harlotry and drunkenness and everything else began to be kind of what it was known for there at Lake Havasu. Lake Havasu is a lake that is formed by the Parker Dam, which dams up the Colorado River, which was designed to pump water into the central parts and southern parts of Arizona, into Phoenix and Tucson. And then that lake became kind of a hotbed for fishing and boating sports. And a guy named Robert McCulloch, later on in the late 1950s, early 1960s, purchased what was at the time the single largest land tract ever purchased in Arizona state history, purchased 26 square miles along Lake Havasu shoreline there. And he wanted to develop it with a man named C.V. Wood, Cornelius Vanderbilt Wood, who was recruited by the Disney brothers, Walt Disney. He is the actual founder and the designer and the builder, architect behind Disneyland. And yeah. Cornelius Vanderbilt, that name should ring a bell if you don't know about the Vanderbilt family. So they're a dynastic family who grew to great power at the same time, contemporaneous with the Reynolds family. And he was recruited out of Stanford Institute, or Research Institute, which was a branch of Stanford University, a hotbed for the mind control experiments in the United States government, scientific technologies program for projects like Mockingbird and Blue Jay and Artichoke and places like that. Stanford Institute was a place where a lot of the scientific technical aspects of that were created. So C.V. Wood was recruited by the Walt Disney brothers to oversee a land picking and evaluation, site planning, and layout for Disneyland. He was the first one to actually start it up and got everything laid out. And he ended up building other communities across the country, like Pleasure Island in Massachusetts and Heritage Square, I believe, in Golden, Colorado. And he ultimately was brought in to help Robert McCulloch, who was the purchaser of all this land, buy the London Bridge, the actual London Bridge built in the 1830s.
It was actually falling down.
Yes, it was falling down because and the reason that London Bridge, little sing-song rhyme everyone sings, is the London Bridge is falling down, is because they've sacrificed children and put them in the walls of that building, and they would entomb them over. And this is why they said if it's falling down, if the people aren't willing to sacrifice their babies and put them into the walls of that, this is why that people are saying you got to keep the bridge built. And this is why every children to this day, you buy a little children's toy, it's got that song programmed into it, because they still want the city of London predominantly. We're not talking about Great Britain Empire. The city of London is one of these city-states, a total autonomous entity on the face of the earth. The District of Columbia is another one, and the Vatican. These are the three empires that really run the military, the financial, and the religious sides of the world for all intents and purposes. The city of London was then given by Robert McCulloch this island that they created, where the London Bridge was brought stone by stone, brought over and built over and created an island there. The city of London legally owns that territory. They purchased it indeed for the price of a Kachina doll. And if y'all don't know what a Kachina doll is, at Mount Prescott, which is where I was born, they call it Mount Hermon, where the Watchers descended, where these fallen angels came down and had sex with women and taught them all these sorceries. The Kachina were these dolls that are carved as effigies during the winter months, from the winter solstice to the summer solstice. They believe these entities will come down and have sex with their daughters, and that they take these dolls, carve them up, and then they nail them to their wall so that they can remember them and make offerings to them. So they literally purchased the land for the price of one Kachina doll. And so that deity is the one who has the spiritual power over that area. Well, the city of London now has a city-state in the sovereign United States, like an embassy here in the United States. So it gives them legal anonymity and immunity. So this is why the pedophilia rings were brought in and centered around Lake Havasu City. This is why C.V. Wood brought in and built another little mind control little micro community there. And then Robert McCulloch began to bring over free flights. I believe he used these DC-6 or Constellation Airline. He brought over free flights from Phoenix, Arizona, up until the 1978. 32,000 people were brought over as prospective buyers to start buying up and building up this community that was catered as a retirement community, so that these male cults, these male sex cults, could have access to continually a new pool of young boys and children being trafficked around, where they had deniability that, hey, it's a retirement area. These are my grandkids, or these are my nephews. These are, and so there was built into the system.
And it's international.
Yeah, an international sex trade. And so from there, they began to set up a lot of the industry that actually funnels the finances and the meat of the human cattle resources to come up through there from the central United States to the southern United States, and kind of consolidate that power basis there in Lake Havasu City. So it kind of became the melting pot for a lot of this activity. And this is why my family was passing me down there. This is why my grandfather set up his base of operations there. He was a good handler. He was really good at fracturing and shattering children. And so he got a good reputation for that, and then was brought in as a Fourth Order Knight in the Knights of Columbus, which he still is to this day.